Welcome to the Imperial Truth. I'm your host, Eric, and today we're going to talk about Zone Mortalis and specifically how Mechanicum is going to play into Zone Mortalis. So I'm trying to do better about my callouts. If you enjoy this sort of content, if you enjoy hearing about Mechanicum in Horus Heresy 3rd Edition, please like, subscribe, do all of the things. If you have ideas for content, something you want to see that I haven't covered yet, please let me know. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. And yeah, I appreciate everybody that subscribed. I think we're up to like 340 subscribers, which is way more than I ever imagined getting. But yeah, let's keep the progress going, and we'll see what we can do with our little Mechanicum channel here. But thanks for coming along on this ride with me. It's been fun. So a little bit of an overview for those of you who might be new to Horus Heresy or maybe aren't familiar with Zone Mortalis. Zone Mortalis is sort of a smaller, faster, more brutal version of our Horus Heresy games. Most Horus Heresy games are 3,000 points. They're spanning battles of, across historic battlefields in the 31st millennium and sort of massive groups of space marines and other groups like our Mechanicum or Solar Auxilia, and just these huge sprawling battles. Zone Mortalis is more like of a skirmish style game. It's more like boarding actions if you're familiar with 40K, or you could be fighting in caverns or abandoned ruins. It actually offers a lot of narrative moments in the story. So do you want to fight under the warrens of Calth? You could do that. Do you want to fight aboard a vessel like the Conqueror with your troops trying to fight their way through World Eaters? We can do that too. It allows for us to have some very interesting versions of the game. The intent is to limit the efficacy of some models, so we don't want dreadnoughts sort of running rampant, a rampage over everything. So we're going to see in these rules that there are some things that are pretty limiting, especially for Mechanicum, and that's the intent. It's not a bug; it's a feature. So just be aware of that. And from my experience, as somebody who played Mechanicum in 2nd edition and played, I think, an okay amount of Zone Mortalis. It wasn't a huge amount, but I did play a number of games. I feel like historically Mechanicum has struggled in this format. We don't have in 2nd edition we didn't have a really good answer for dreadnoughts. Dreadnoughts and Zone Mortalis were really strong, and we did not in 2nd edition have a really strong answer to even Terminators, which again are really good in Zone Mortalis. In addition, we don't tend to have very choppy or very melee focused character models. So yeah, that's sort of where we're at with it. We'll go through the rules and see what we think. The answer, if you're looking for spoilers, it's still going to be tough for us. But the rules are significantly different this time around, and so maybe it'll be better. I will leave this caveat here. I have not played a game of Zone Mortalis yet. I have a list ready. We'll talk about it at the end. I would like to start playing some games and sort of get my head around it. But I have a feeling that my collection personally is not particularly well suited to this. But there are some options. You could build a list that's pretty cool in Zone Mortalis. So yeah, let's get in here. So there are a number of terrain rules that we're going to start with. The game largely uses the core rules, but there are a few tweaks here and there that are worth noting. And some of these are going to be pretty alien to us, so I'm going to take some time and talk about them. The first is the idea of having a ceiling. So if we're in a cavern, or if we're in a warren, like an underground a hive city, or if we're on aboard a ship, we can't have our barrage weapons fire indirectly anymore. Not a huge deal, but can be a little bit annoying for us. We'll find out how scatter weapons work in a minute. But this isn't a huge disadvantage, but it is something to be aware of as we are moving through here. In our corridors and chambers, which is a type of terrain that you can have, if a model moves more than 9 inches, It has to take a hazard test. And as a note, the hazard test is a 1d6, not on a 1 you just removed as a casualty. So this is different than dangerous terrain, or dangerous terrain tests, which I believe do wounds that can not be saved but can be mitigated in the core rules. So this is a lot more brutal. If you have somehow have like a 4-wound automata, like maybe a Vorax, and you rush it through some corridors and you roll a 1, that 4-wound model is just dead. All corridors and chambers have the confined space 10 rule, unless they're otherwise noted. We will come back to that in a minute. Confined space will be defined in just a second. And it's important to note that hazardous tests are in addition to dangerous terrain tests. So if you move through dangerous terrain and you move more than 10 inches, you take both tests, which is, again, additionally brutal. It's you don't want to be running your jump inventory around on these boards. It could be very bad for you. The confined space X rule is just says that it's impassable terrain if you have a vehicle with 3 or more hull points, which I think aside from tarantulas, we don't have any vehicles with 3 or with less than 3 hull points. So yeah, that's a consideration. And if you have the bulky X rule, if your X equals the confined space rule, you can't move through that space. So let's say you have an area with confined space 6, and you have a Thanatar which has bulky 9, that Thanatar cannot move through that space. And as we're going to see in the scenarios, that pretty much means that you can't run a Thanatar in Zone Mortalis, which stinks. I kind of like the idea of running one, but yeah, in the core rules or in the core scenarios, there's just not a lot of room for that. Doorways are also something we don't tend to have in our core Horus Heresy rules. They are 2 to 4 inches in width. We have to consider our base sizes with these and think about how big some of our bases are. Things like Castellax are on really large bases compared to the size of the model. I think they're on 60s, which means that they couldn't go through a 2-inch door if my math is right. Yeah. So just keep that in mind when we're thinking about doors and moving through things, and maybe just have a conversation with your opponent about it. In addition, the doorways have an X value associated with them. They can't be moved through by vehicles ever. If you have the bulky X rule, you compare it to the doorway. So the Thanatar with the bulky 9 can't move through a door with door 4 because they have double the bulkiness. So their bulky number is double or more than double the door, so they can't move through. But they would reduce their movement by 3 inches if they move through a door 6, because 9 minus 6 is 3, and so that difference then becomes the value that you use for your movement. That's not a huge deal. Like, it's not impossible to play around these, but just be aware that it is a thing, and definitely have a conversation with your opponent about base sizes and moving through doorways before the game. I personally would always rule that the door number, so like a door 4, a Castellax could move through that because they are not greater than bulky 4. I forget what they are. They're bulky 3, bulky 4 maybe. But regardless, they could move through those things. They're bulky 4, so they could definitely do it. But yeah, just talk to your opponent about it. Fortifications have an AV of, doorways are fortifications. They have an armor value of 12 and 3 hull points. You can shoot them, you can charge them, you can attack them in close combat. Glancing hits are always going to do 1 hit point to them. They are not difficult for us to take out. We have plenty of things that can do this, but do be aware that because you can charge your doorways, that means that you could move further, but also that your opponent could move further. So things like a firestorm become very useful here because we could move up, shoot a doorway, and then during the assault phase, we could do a setup move, shoot again, and then not charge the doorway if we wanted to. But yeah, there's some manipulation, some squishiness here, but just be aware that your opponent can also use that to get across the table a little bit faster. In order to open or close the door, you have to make an int check before or after moving. So there's a lot of flexibility here. We are really good at int checks usually, and that's just opening and closing doors for the purposes of the game. You can't, we're going to find out in a second, you can't shoot through closed doors. So it is a way for you to sort of be defensive and hold people up too. Because you would have to, if you weren't in base-to-base contact with a door at the beginning of your turn, you'd have to move up, stop, open up the door, and then that unit would be done moving. They could still charge, but if you kind of position yourself well, you can create some ambushes there. So there's, having played with the doorways in second edition and in 40K, the ability to open and close doors and manipulate them is really fun and kind of a pretty dynamic version way to play the game. Other rules that are important that we should mention: Firestorm and Shrapnel is a rule. It has nothing to do with the Firestorm rule on your cast select, sorry. But this just says that blast markers and templates can't move through walls and can't damage cross walls. So a template weapon is only going to damage things that are on your side of the wall. It's not going to magically phase through the wall and do damage to the thing on the other side. And if you shoot a blast marker down a corridor, when it scatters, the center hole of the blast marker cannot leave that corridor and can't cross across a wall. So you can't have a situation where you have like quantum tunneling of your artillery shell through a wall. It's makes them more accurate because they stay in one area, but also the blast is not going to affect things outside of that. So our 5-inch blasts are not nearly as useful because you will very rarely have a corridor that's going to be 5 inches across. But it does make it a little bit easier to use those weapons. And then blind panic is when a routed unit passes through a friendly unit. So a routed unit runs away, they pass through a friendly unit, that friendly unit has to make a leadership test. Hopefully that won't come up very often for you, but it could, and you should be aware of it when it does. This is a potential problem because for some of our units, we're not typically going to have them route, but you might have a unit of, say, tech thralls out in front, and if they run, then they could make other units run. I mean, the flip side is that you could try and do this to your opponent too, but it's going to be when it comes up, it's going to be a big deal, and when it doesn't, you're not typically going to think about it. All right, so now that we have the kind of core rules set up, in this, we're going to talk about setting up the terrain, which is a big part of this game, and then we'll talk about the scenarios and sort of general thoughts on all of this. So this is played on a 4x4 board as opposed to a 4x6 board, and the way that they have defined it in the rules, they want you to divide the board into 16 12x12 sections. That's going to be really important to keep in mind as we move forward. About 75% of the sections, according to the rules, should have a wall. Walls are defined as 2 inches wide and 2 to 12 inches long. Now, if you have the boarding action terrain, like I do, and you intend to use it on this, I think you just assume that they're not going to be 2 inches wide because that boarding action terrain is only like less than 1 inch wide for a lot of it. But just treat it, as terrain. And then 2 to 12 inches long. That's a huge difference in length in terms of our sides. I would try and stay on the higher side. Play with the boards, see what they look like. But I would think that's pretty important. All sections, so all 16 of your sections, are going to have at least one doorway. They suggest that half of them be 2-inch doorways, half of them be larger doorways, and that half of them start open and half of them start closed. So lots of flexibility here again, but we should have doorways sort of everywhere to kind of give you that feeling of moving in and out of corridors and rooms and sort of seizing and controlling the ship or whatever you're fighting over room by room. It suggests 2 barricades for each section of the battlefield, so 32 total. Now, barricades give you a 5-up cover save. This is a lot of barricades. I have 2 sets of barricades from the Kill Team box, and I think there are 6 or 8 in each one of those. So I would need at least double that number of barricades. I have to make a whole bunch more barricades. I'm probably not going to do that right away, but you know, I mean, we can make barricades out of anything really, dead bodies or broken pieces of the ship or whatever. So have some fun modeling these, but they do suggest quite a few of them, and then they also suggest 2 area terrain pieces that can't be bigger than 6 by 6 inches. Probably not areas where you have a wall section. So again, if we're 16 sections, 12 of them are going to have walls, 2 of them are going to have open area terrains, right? So you could have, you know, kind of play with it there and figure it out. In terms of ideas for this, there are lots of ideas. You could have an open area terrain that's a bunch of wires that are hanging down from the ceiling that act like vines, giving cover and slowing things down. You could have steam vents coming up from lower decks, creating obscuring terrain in an area and maybe probably dangerous terrain as you're moving through the hot steam. You could have pools of acid in the ship, where like some conduit has broken and some condensate or acid or solvent or something is like pooled and is eating through the deck layer by layer, right? There are lots of opportunities for area terrain that are pretty interesting and could be fit your sort of boarding action theme here. So just you know, go crazy, have fun with it, and let your imagination run wild. In our scenario rules overall, they're largely primary objective games. So unfortunately for us, they're very similar to the core rules in that we have objectives and we're fighting over them. We'll talk about why that's unfortunate in a minute for Mechanicum. I also just don't like that style of a game. I would rather there be like a reactor that we're going to go fight after over or something like that. I think that would be a lot more interesting. Um, Line is going to be really powerful in Zone Mortalis, and we have no line. Maybe the Skitarii that are coming out for us that were revealed, maybe they will be line? Question mark. I don't know. I wouldn't hold out hope on that. But you know. Without line, we're going to really struggle to score. Just to put this in perspective, well, we'll wait till the scenarios and we'll put it in perspective. There are 2 rules that you can have through the game. One is Abyssal Darkness, which just says that you can't draw line of sight more than 6 inches through areas with this rule. I'm very curious to see how this actually plays out because I don't think there are going to be many places where we have more than 6 inches of line of sight just in general, given the number of things that are going on. But you know, yeah, you could have that. And then impenetrable area is that neither players can deep strike into that area. So you can't like teleport into that part of the ship, which is probably a pretty good balancing rule. But yeah, so those are the scenario rules in general. There's some more, but these are the ones that I think are important to talk about. So this looks like a lot, but it's each one of the 3 scenarios with each one pulled forward. I just want to kind of go through these with you and talk about them. So first and foremost, we have different objectives for the scenarios, and for each of these, it's basically just go capture the points. We have the points laid out here. There are 4 points on the battlefield. The objective markers on this sector sweep have a value of 2. And we'll come back to that in a minute. Slay the Warlord is going to give you 2. First Strike is going to give you 2. First Strike is not going to pop up very often. Going to be really honest. We'll talk about it in a minute. And then Last Man Standing for 1, which, you know, we could try to play into a little bit. But yeah, that's our thing, and it does go for 5 turns. So that is a good thing. I think more Warhammer is a good thing, and I think that 5 turns is necessary with how dense these boards are going to be in terms of terrain. So we have 4 objective markers positioned across the board, 1 in your deployment zone, 1 in your opponent's deployment zone, 1 close to your deployment zone, and 1 close to your opponent's deployment zone. You can't put them in impassable terrain. You have to put them as close as possible to the location. And this uses the failing power conduits, impenetrable area, and reserves and seize the initiative special rules. So there are a bunch of rules that are available here. Failing power conduits is a special one for this, which is just you roll a dice, and on a 1, you get abyssal darkness. So everything's plunged into darkness. All right, so let's talk about the setup here. You can see we have our 16 areas that are set up, our 16 different deployment spots or board sections. Some of them are labeled with the alpha, and some of them are labeled with the beta. What do they mean? Alpha have a confined space of 8. They have a confined space of 8. That means that our Thanatars cannot move through those zones because they have a bulky 9. They just can't. So if you deploy a Thanatar on this board, you cannot move it, ever, under any circumstances. All the beta zones, the middle zones, have a confined space rule of 6. I don't think that affects us very much. I think everything that is important is a 3. Let me just check on the Damatar, because I don't run Damatars because they are not something I have in my collection. Damatars are bulky 4, so we're fine. We're fine on pretty much everything else on here. But just be aware that your Thanatar literally cannot move through here. I don't know what Dreadnoughts are. I want to say that they're 8s, but that's still going to limit them pretty severely in that. So overall, in this scenario, your opponent is going to probably put a unit of tactical Marines on their back objective. You're going to put something with hopefully comptroller on your back objective, which means they'll be scoring 4 points per turn, line 2 on tacticals, I think, and you'll be scoring 4 on that. That means that you need at least one other comptroller 2 model with a unit to get on another objective to even keep up with them. We're going to get outscored. We're just going to get outscored. It's going to be really hard. Even with Vanguard units, it's going to be hard for us to do this. Yeah, and that's sort of where we were in second edition, let's be honest. Our second scenario is terminal control. Again, set up with the 16 boxes. We have Slay the Warlord for strike last man standing, still fighting over objectives, different objective arrangement. These objectives are a little bit different. We'll go through this in just a minute. Again, 5 turns. We get the impenetrable area, so no deep striking here. Reserves and seize the initiative rules are also at play here. For this one, we can attempt to interface with one or more objective markers. If we select a marker that we control that's within 3 inches of the center, you're within 3 inches of the center of that objective marker and not locked in combat, you make an intelligence check. I like intelligence checks. If failed, nothing happens. If it succeeds, we can increase the value up to 3, which is actually really kind of cute. So I like that aspect of it. But again, we're going to be stuck in the same problem that we had before, which is we have these alpha and beta objectives sort of everywhere on the board, alpha and beta zones. The alpha zones are confined space 8 again. Beta zones are confined space 6 again. So again, the center of the battlefield is impassable to anything that's bigger than bulky 6. Again, Thanatar's literally not playable in this board. And it's very unlikely that you're going to get any line of sight sort of across the board with these things. So again, just be aware of that as we are going through here. But this one is, of the 3 of them, I think I like this one the best. I like the idea of kind of going through and trying to activate all of the objectives and make these intelligence checks and increasing the value of them across the board. The last of our scenarios is signal influx. This one is just really crazy. So there's a rule in here that is really weird. So let's get into it. It's got the same thing: Slay the Warlord, first strike, last man standing, all available for our points. As a note, let me know in the comments if you think those numbers should be higher. I think they should be higher. If we're gonna have objectives that are up to value 3, as we saw in terminal control, getting 2 points for Slay the Warlord isn't that big of a deal. But yeah, again, we have 9 objective markers here, kind of all over the place, but we'll see that they go away in a moment. Again, a 5-turn game. We'll come back to Crumbling Superstructure, which is, I like it. It's kind of fun. It's going to be interesting to play this scenario. So this mission uses 3 objective markers. The locations of these objective markers will change at the start of the battlefield or the battle turn. In this start phase of each battle turn, you roll a d3 for the horizontal axis, and one player rolls a d3 for the vertical axis, and to determine where the objective markers are placed. So you use your grid to kind of like place out the objective markers. Yeah, so that's the way that your objective markers are placed. It is interesting. It's interesting. It's interesting. It'll be fun. So if we're ranking these scenarios, right? The first one, let's see if I can go back. So sector sweep is your generic balance scenario. This is the boring vanilla scenario that you're going to go through. Terminal control looks to me to be the most a narrative based one where you're actually doing something. I would literally probably set up instead of markers for our objectives, I would actually put little like conduits on the board and make that the thing, because I think that would look really cool. And you're basically trying to fix the conduits and repair something or break the conduits and then keep them broken. And then signal influx is the beer and pretzels one where you sit down with your friend and you just have a good laugh. And it's, yeah. And I say that because the random objectives are kind of funny and are going to be hard to play around. But more so than anything, we have this crumbling infrastructure rule. So after step 7, deploy armies, but before 8, right? So we've deployed our models into those little corner zones that are itty bitty tiny. If there is a section with no models in it, which is going to at least be 4, but could be a lot more, right? Because so if you don't put your guys in the corners of your deployment zone, you will not have anybody in that zone. So you roll a dice. If the result is 2 or more, that is confined space special rule, where your confined space equals the dice roll that you rolled. Let's just pause real quick to talk about that. So in those 4 center zones that you're guaranteed to roll for, and that the objective might just magically pop into because of the rules, you could have that very easily locked off by a lot of confined space 2 and 3 and 4 in that area, which means that our Castellax cannot enter those zones. And in fact, a lot of things can't enter that zone. I think Myrmidons also cannot enter that area. Yeah, they're bulky 3, so they couldn't enter a confined space 2 zone. It's gonna be tough to move around this board. It's gonna be fun. It'll be interesting. I mean, Terminators are also going to have a problem moving around, but that center zone is going to be really, really hard to enter. Like I said, this is the one that if you just want to sit down and have a good laugh, this is the good laugh one, I think, because you literally cannot take this scenario seriously. There's too many random variables, and in fact, you could, if you wanted to, purposefully don't deploy into a zone to force the roll and try to keep your opponent out. So if you had an opponent and they have a lot of stuff with bulky 3 or 4, you could be a little bit more cagey on your deployment and then trigger those rolls, hoping that they won't be able to move through those zones. Overall scenarios, I like these more than the core rule scenarios. I think they're more dynamic. I really like terminal control, signal influx. You really would have to have the right opponent to play it. But yeah, they're interesting. I think that they lay the groundwork for us as a community writing our own scenarios and making them a little bit more interesting. I don't know how I feel about the confined space being everywhere. I think I would like confined space to be a lower number, but on fewer squares. So if you had like an area in the ship that only infantry could go to. That would be pretty interesting, but maybe not the whole board. But yeah, maybe that's just me. I really like my big stompy Thanatar's jumping around the board. But yeah, so initial thoughts. Thanatar's are pretty much useless. We won't be able to use them at all. A lack of line and core infantry will be a problem for us. We really need a line unit. We need a line unit that we can put out there and do line things with. I don't think we're going to get it. I would not hold out hope in the what are they, the Scutari that were spoiled. And here's why: because we have comptroller. And unless you made a rule that like you couldn't add a comptroller model to a like Scutari line, let's say they're line 2, that would probably break the game, because then you'd be scoring a 2-point objective you'd be scoring 6 points on. That seems like a lot. So I don't think they're gonna be a line. And yeah, we're just gonna have to be careful with it and play around it, and maybe talk to your opponent about it and be like, hey, listen, I can't really bring line. This would be a great game for you to bring a bunch of guys that are not line. I think Ursurks are going to be pretty useful. You don't want to move 10 inches with them ever, but they have Vanguard and they're really good in melee. And one of the problems I've had with Ursuraks is it's hard to justify putting like a Magos with them to boost some of their stats and to give them Cyberthurgy. This is a good opportunity for you to do that, because they don't want to move 10 inches, because they'll take that not dangerous terrain, but the hazardous terrain test. So yeah, I think that's pretty cool. I really like the idea of Castellax battle maniples here. They have big bases, so they can block up corridors. They have loads of wounds. They have a good toughness. They're pretty shooty. With Firestorm, they're pretty mobile. They're a good tar pit. You can have them block off objectives if you just want to have them block off objectives, and they're not going to get status effect away. They're not probably going to break away from things unless your opponent's bringing Terminators against you. Most Space Marine units are going to have a hard time shifting these guys quickly. So yeah, I think they've got a lot of play. I really like Myrmidon Secutors. I've been kind of kicking around the idea of getting a few more kits of the 3D prints to play with. I need to paint my original ones first. But these guys are great. They are durable. They have amazing shooting. They have pretty good melee. They have Vanguard as well. They don't really care about moving too fast because they can't move fast. Yeah, these guys are just, they're going to be really good. Stick them in there, let them do their thing, and kick the crap out of your enemy. Terminators are still going to be a problem for us in this. We just don't have good answers to Terminators. Even AP2 things are usually only doing damage to Terminators 66 to 50% of the time, depending on what your invuln save is. So we don't have a lot that's going to consistently be able to take them out. And given the confined spaces and the corridors and all of the dynamics of Zone Mortalis, you only really get a turn to do some damage to Terminators. I think maybe the Darkfire cannons are potentially pretty interesting here, because they are Terminator killers and they have a status effect on them. So if you could status effect a unit of Terminators and kill a model or two, maybe you buy yourself a turn to kill another model or two. But yeah, I think those guys and the retinue units are going to be problems. So yeah, but if you've played games, let me know. Give me your thoughts on, and I'm curious to see what people have experienced with this. So this is it's not pretty, but this is my Mechanicum Taghmata Army List that I'm going to start with for Zone Mortalis. This is not optimized at all. Just don't look at me like, wow, where are you going with this? Nowhere, actually. This is what I have in my collection and trying to make that work currently. If I had all the money in the world and all the time in the world, I would probably pick up some Vorax and some more Myrmidons. for Zone Mortalis. I think that would be really fun to kind of do and play with those things. And maybe a Damatar as well to kind of throw out at things. I put a lot of thought into whether or not I wanted to bring Tech Thalls, but at 100 points for 10, I just can't justify it. I just can't justify it right now. There is another list kicking around in my mind where instead of Tech Thralls, I ally in some militia guys with the we talked about it before, but it's the ability that gives you right of pure thought, and then just basically run my Tech Thralls as lobotomized militia, which I might do at some point, but I got to get them painted up first. But this is the list that I'm kind of playing with. So in the main attachment, we have a Myrmidox Magos with Cyber Familiar, which is obvious why we're taking that, because we always want the +2 to our int or -2 to our int checks. Fury of Ages, which is the Myrmidon specific Cyber Thurgy power. It's got a power axe because that's what the model has, a bolt pistol because it's got a revolver, and I don't know what else a revolver would be, and a phased plasma fusel because that's a good gun. I'm gonna use my prime advantage here to give this one Paragon of Battle, making it a bit more fighty and better at killing things. Then I toss in a Lacrimata Tech Priest. The Lacrimata Tech Priest is going to have a Cyber Familiar, of course. Fleshnet Protocols for Lacrimatas, Cyber Thurgy. It'll have a Power Fist and a Plasma Pistol. So Power Fist because that's what the model has, and I had some points left over. Plasma Pistol because it's got a Plasma Pistol or Volkite in its hand. Yeah, I had some points. It'll get the logistical benefit, and with logistical benefit, I'll pull in my Myrmidons. I have 4 Myrmidons in my collection. The Secular, not Secular, the Myrmidon Secular Lord. And so the Lord and 2 other models are going to get the twin-phased plasma fusels, and then I'm going to toss in 1 twin graviton gun there just for status effects in that 5-inch AoE. I don't know if that's a good choice, but I think the status effect potential is pretty interesting. And so the Myrmidon Magos and the Myrmidons will kind of march up one of our corridors and sort of bully people off of objectives. I'm not so worried about scoring so long as I can keep you off the objectives. I will maybe win on something else. And then I tossed 9 Thalax with 4 multi-melters and 5 lightning guns. If I had the models modeled this way, I would run 6 multi-meltas and just keep it at that. But this is what I have. Is this overkill? Yeah, it's probably overkill. But I like the 4 multi-meltas to try and take out some Terminators. And the lightning guns can potentially pop a status effect on something. Is this unit optimal or good? Probably not. For the points, I would easily toss in another unit of Myrmidons or let's see, what else would I like? Vorax. I would really like Vorax, honestly. But it's what I have, and it's what the points worked out with. And then I also have a unit of Ursarox with 6 models with 4 claws and 2 fists. Ideally, I would just run 6 fists at this point, but 6 claws at this point. But I have 2 with fists, so I'm going to run them as they are. I don't think that's optimal. We saw the maths earlier, and it turns out claws are still better at killing Terminators? Question mark. They're roughly equal. Technically they're a little worse. But yeah, it's 6 to 1, half dozen the other. Run them how you like them. But I think Ursarox are pretty good here. So that's the main list. And then because of the new FAQ, and they're very clear that this is the way they want Mechanicum to run, I tossed in an allied detachment. Why did you toss in an allied detachment, Eric? Well, by tossing in an allied detachment, I get a second Magos with a prime advantage. So that's the entire thought process here. So in this attachment, I have a Cybernetica Magos with Cortex Controller, Cyber Familiar. Cortex Controller just gives you the ability to react with your automata. I'll get a Cyber Familiar in here, Overcharge Reactors in here, Power Axe, Irid Cleanser, and I'll grab the Clade Operative logistical benefit, not logistical benefit, prime advantage. So the idea with this guy is that the Irid Cleanser is an additional opportunity to pop out a status effect panic on the unit that we're going to charge. and it also has phage. So if you manage to kill a model or do damage to a model, the entire unit's -1 toughness, which is pretty cool. For my Clade Operative, I'm going to toss in a Calexis Assassin. Why a Calexis, you say? Well, I really want to put status effects on people to keep them from scoring. I would love to make people -1 to their int checks, and the Calexis Assassin does all of that within 12 inches all the time, and it's really hard to shift, really hard to kill. And you don't even have to make attacks with it. You can literally just move it up the board and use it to debuff your enemy. And then lastly, I have my Castellax Battle Maniple, 5 models in there. 3 of them have double power blades, and 2 of them have double flamers. And again, the point of this unit is just to move up the board, take up space, push people off objectives, hold objectives possibly, and just kind of be a nuisance in the middle board. I think this is not a terrible list. I don't really have much to stay back on a home objective, which is the problem. So that is annoying. But yeah, I think we're just gonna kind of go for it and go in and try and beat people up. I'm open to your thoughts on it. Obviously there are weaknesses. I would drop the Thalex if I could, if I had another unit that I think would work. The Ursaroks could come out and I could pop in some Castellax destroyers instead, with the, what are they called? The Darkfire cannons. But I'm really curious to see how the boards are set up first before I get a feel for like how many fields of fire are we going to have? Are long distance weapons even really useful? I don't think that they are going to be. So we'll see how it goes. Anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for sticking around for this long. And I will see you in our next video.